Welcome to Property Quorum. As usual, we're joined by the usual suspects to talk about all the turmoil that seems to lie within the property sector. Today, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home, Juliet Baboolal of Gareth Wax, Zahrah Aullybocus of Next Law, of course, our Supremo Hamish McLay of Search Convey, and of course, Silas J. of WikiWham. And today's topic is no more or less confusing or irritating than any of the others that we ever discussed. Is the property sector ready for the legal turmoil of Commonhold conversion? And of course, this is traditional now here. I'm throwing Hamish straight under the bus.
Right, out of the office at the moment, as you'll notice, because we're back in the Bluebell Wood. But the important topic, which will presumably continue till this time next year, I don't know how long it's going to take to resolve, but there is a big conversation. Our incoming government has decided that leases need to be amended, like the Conservative Party did when they were actually leading the government, and they couldn't find a way through because it is such a complicated scenario. Now, we're fortunate today to have two people who have to deal with leases on a fairly regular basis. But the challenge is when you have a situation as we have in the UK, historical. I mean, it's been set up. Leases have been a major part of what's been going on, particularly to do with flats, which are essential for the number of properties that we need to build. What's the way forward? What can the government do to actually improve the situation about leases? And in many cases, it's the content of the lease, the restrictions. From what I understand, from my end of things, and I don't have the knowledge that the experts do, it's really what people do with those leases, the conditions that are put in there, and what the management companies tend to do with those leaseholders that they are meant to be sort of responsible for looking after.
Well, I'm going to get some immediate comment from one of our legal eagles, Juliet.
So Hamish hit the nail on the head. It's about the management of these units. You know, you can have a block of flats that's 4 flats, which might be easily managed, or you might have a block of flats with 500 units, where that's where the difficulty comes in. With Commonhold, the idea is one size fits all. And, you know, I don't see how that's going to work as such. On the one hand, you haven't got a lease that depreciates over time. So you've got a fixed set of years, or, you know, you've got a security or a property that doesn't diminish. But equally, the one size fits all scenario, I'm not so sure that lenders are going to be happy about that. The crux of it is getting the management right. And if you can get the management model right, where things like service charges, etc., are understood by the lessees and understood how these things accrue, you know, things like major works that happen, why do these, why is there a consultation period, etc., rather than someone saying, you know, this is mandatory, you've got to just do this. You know, there are rules and systems in place at the moment which ensure that people have their say, but they're not sort of enforced. And I think that's what needs to happen. We need to have the ability to have checks and balances for these management companies that manage these flats, whether it's in the leasehold model or the Commonhold, but they need to be accountable for the leasehold system to be better.
Zahrah, can I have some comment from your neck of the woods, please?
I absolutely agree with Juliet. And a lot of this needs to be raised at the conveyancing point to say to people that, you know, this is what you could potentially face. Now, I think the issue with Commonhold for lenders was that they were concerned that the buildings wouldn't be looked after properly. You know, they've got something similar in Australia, which is called strata. And yes, it's got its own problems. But whatever we put in place, it's not going to solve the issue of dodgy developers putting up blocks of flats that are, you know, they're probably going to last 50 years before you have to probably spend the same amount of money to fix everything that's in the flats. So they need to tackle it as a two-pronged approach. One, they need to fix the developers, and the other is, you know, making sure you've got management structures in place that are accountable. And it's not just management companies, it's housing associations, it's councils. I don't know if you saw that story where a council tried to put through £28,000 worth of mobile phone bills through the service charges. So there's lots of where there's no real transparency. And basically, you know, my issue is that everyone's concentrating on digitizing and tech as the answer to our problem, but the problems are actually caused by humans, and you need to sort out the human element before you can digitize everything and rubber stamp it and say, yes, off you go, your house is fine or your flat is fine.
Wow. Well, but before we go to the sharp end of the stick, which will be Chris, I'm going to go straight over to Silas. What can be done? How can we make this so it's actually got some teeth?
You know, it's quite interesting. I was just reflecting on my own experience of being an investor, and I'll just share a very quick story where we bought a freehold to a block of 9 flats, as well as 2 flats within that block. And we bought it off a social housing provider, and they were paying £1 a unit to insure all of their properties. I think they had something like, I don't know, 50, 60,000 units under their belt. And the problem was, in that instance, is we want to be fair to everybody as the new freeholder, but your costs as an individual or as a small company start to skyrocket. So you have certain provisions within the lease that you have to maintain. Obviously, insurance is a big one, buildings insurance, and our costs moved drastically. So the service charge went from something like £40 or £50 a month all the way up to £100, £150 a month in short order. And you know, these are the sorts of problems that people are coming up against. So there's almost an argument for a national body to not just impose the standards, but actually play some kind of role in the maintenance of the freeholders' responsibilities. You know, if you've got a group insurance policies spanning tens of thousands of units, you would like to think that that would bring the economies of scale into play and reduce the overall costs to leaseholders. But to raise on some of the points that the ladies have kindly pointed out this morning, where you have dodgy builders doing cutting corners, creating problems in the future. So that cost of redoing a roof, for example, might be anywhere from 200,000 to 2 million quid. You know, how do you call upon, you know, 5, 10, 15, 100 leaseholders to then all of a sudden stump up several hundred thousands or several tens of thousands to repair those that roof? So I think there's an argument for a national body to intervene between a freeholder and a management company. That would be my view, but you know, that's based on limited experience of being a freeholder for a short period of time, which I did not enjoy, I'll be honest.
I think we've actually, good idea. Let's move over, because they're going to say that Gareth, who has a habit of disappearing these days with the improved technology he has.
It's
Chris.
marvelous. Ever since I got Windows 11, I seem to disappear all the time, but some people may think that's a good thing. Chris, would you give us some comment? What's happening at your end?
My concern is, I think that it's necessary. Yes, change is absolutely necessary. The system has clear deficiencies that need to be addressed. So it's right that we're having these conversations around topics like this at the moment at such high levels, and looking to adjust and amend statute. My reservations are that whenever government gets involved, it seems to screw things up worse. And I just really want to make sure that they stress test this, that they actually look at all the different angles and actually try and break what they're trying to create, and look at the different ways that in the real world these situations are going to crop up, that are going to stress it. Is the framework that they're proposing looking to create and have that flexibility in the model? Is there going to be equity in there? My concerns around statute is it's very rigid. So I'm keen to see how they will build in the principles of equity into this model, to give it that flexibility, to make sure it can accommodate the different circumstances that will come up in the real world examples as it starts to get used. My reservations are that certainly this government, they seem to be very keen to throw everything out and start again, even before they have what they're going to start again with. So we're now left in a position where we really are very ambiguous about how we're going to be moving forwards. So yeah, I have some serious reservations.
The interesting thing is, and this is on a completely separate topic, and I'm in no way in favour of the previous of the policy of the previous government. But we've just literally received net migration figures, which appear to be down by 728,000 from previous years, which means that a policy that was put in place by the Conservatives was, I can't even believe I'm saying this, actually making a difference. So it goes to show that taking the approach of ripping everything down without literally giving it a pause for of further thought may not be the best approach. Hamish, what's your thoughts?
Well, we have a situation here. It was really all comments that everybody's made of a similar sort of nature, that it needs to be investigated before we can take steps. But it was Juliet that came up with this key point, and it does come up regularly in terms of the way successive governments look at it, the way I think the overall sector is looking at this. They're trying to move forward with a one size fits all, and it doesn't work in so many aspects. And I mean, I think it was Zahrah that said you've got to look at the human element of it, because the humans that have created the situation to a certain extent, their particular way of thinking, I think we'll do it this way, because it hasn't actually been effectively regulated. So that is going to be a key way sort of forward. And I think, as Chris said, we're almost about to dump in. If you take away what we have, we're in a black hole. And it's going to create so much damage to, if you like, the finances of so many people who've invested over time into buying up the sort of freehold of property, and their pensions depend on that. There are millions upon millions of pounds invested, and we've got to look at how on earth are you going to control all of that, and whether we take a step first of all and say let's look at new build in the first instance and try and sort something out for that. But it's not something that can be easily obtained to actually sort of get the whole thing right and make sure, particularly their management companies. I think there's so much, and Chris very often says, there's an awful lot of cogs that we need to sort of take into consideration, and this is absolutely sort of massive. I can't get my brain around it, but it's limited to what I do, effectively. And I'm sure there are better ideas that will come forward. At the moment, though, we do seem to struggle.
Juliet, is there anything we can do in the short term while the dust seems to settle and this current government works out which way is up?
Well, there's an old saying, you pay more if you do the thing wrong and then rectify it than actually doing it right in the first place. And there needs to be a lot of stress testing. There needs to be a lot of input from people who understand the leasehold system. Zahrah mentioned that there's a forum tomorrow in terms of people, talking about leasehold reforms, etc. And people who are really keen to see this change needs to put their voice and their opinions forward. There needs to be regulation and my concern or accountability. And my concern is all of this sort of new influx of ideas, etc. It's going to boil down to costs. It's going to cost someone, and it's going to cost the consumer. It's going to cost the leaseholder. And we don't need further costs being added onto the system. What we need is for flats to be effectively managed, and for people to have easy access to money through lenders, etc., if they wish to purchase flats, or to have a good idea of how these flats work. So in 10 years' time, if these major works or roof replacements are needed, then they need to understand their exposure and understand that, look, you're not in it alone, your other leaseholders are in it as well. So communication really is key. And often the crux of it or the brunt of it is given to the lawyers. but we can't foresee these floodgates. It's an understanding and a learning and an education that the nation needs insofar as leasehold properties are concerned, but it needs to trickle down to the managing agents and the people behind, the development companies, etc. So everyone's on the same page in terms of how this works. This was, that when leases were created, it was supposed to be based on fairness and justice and sort of like a communal system where everyone contributed equally, not a developer or a management company raking it in by, not doing what they're supposed to do and charging huge service charges, etc., or the lessee getting in and, having to incur additional costs or losing their property because they can't afford to pay service charges, for example, and their lease is forfeited. That was not what it was intended for. So we need to go back to the initial objective of leases and have a real rethink of what works in a cost-effective way.
It does seem to me that investigations have been done by the previous incumbents, and yet Labour seem to be keen to start all over again. What's to do, Zahrah?
I don't know, but they should have a look at what the previous government put together. I responded to a lot of these consultations, but it just seems that if you said something that the Tories didn't like, they just ignore you. Same with, the shared ownership consultations that have been put out. Everyone's saying it's not working, and yet they're just sitting on it because, when these, it's a vicious cycle. There's going to be short-term pain, but the short-term pain in the long run will work out to a long-term gain. So if we could sort these problems out now, and yes, people are not going to like it, but in the long run, it may work out for the better, so that people do get some transparency and that people do start, thinking about, having a reserve fund right from the word go to fix buildings, and especially if the developers are prone to using SPVs and disappearing off to a tropical island.
Wouldn't it be fun, Chris, if we could disappear off to that tropical island?
There's got to be that accountability. I absolutely agree with Zahrah, and Zahrah put some great points forwards. I think we should put Zahrah in charge.
Zahrah, you up for it? If Zahrah and Baboolal and Juliet could work together and sort this out, and the rest of us can sip margaritas, I'll be very happy.
I just feel like I'm shouting into the abyss, Gareth. Nobody wants to listen. I'm shouting. I spend 45 minutes telling new purchasers about all these problems, and they're like, oh, nobody's told me that before. And I'm just like, well, I know, because if you go to another solicitor or an estate agent, they want you to buy. They're not telling you that this is going to be an issue. They just want you to sign the lease and get on with it. They don't care if you're going to suffer long-term financial consequences. And, same with the mortgage brokers. But, again, it's not just leasehold, it's freehold as well, where you're getting all these sites that have been built within the last 30 years where the roads aren't adopted. And I kind of feel that conveyancers are kind of to blame as well. They need to take some responsibility, because we're being bullied by developers who are basically saying to clients, you don't exchange, we're pulling the plug on you, we're going elsewhere. So your client's frightened, so they will accept whatever the developer's pushing on them. And so this is how we've slowly crept up to the situation where we've got these sites that need to be managed. But yet, the councils are saying, well, we never said we wouldn't take them on. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And then people aren't understanding that, they don't get a discount on their council tax just because the estates are managed privately. They still have to pay full council tax with an estate service charge.
Wow. Silas, is there any light at the end of the tunnel, or is it, as usual, just another oncoming train?
Well, thank you, Gareth, for final thoughts. I think that what I'm observing across many industries and many professions is this corruption creep, if you like, and there's more and more of these things developing where the individual is heralded above the community, and I think we've lost track of those community values of doing the right thing for the wider and greater good. and it's now down to the individual and corporate profits and what we can get away with in order to, live our life, rather than actually the legacy that we're going to leave behind. And that's really where I think we need to return back to those community values. We need to do the greater good, and we need to have that top of mind with everything that we're doing. The work that Zahrah's doing there, in terms of putting that out to a wider marketplace across the nation. These are the things that you need to be aware of. All of a sudden, you're holding developers' feet to the fire of, actually, I now can't sell all of the properties that I've got on my books because I've developed all these issues, and now my corporate profits are going to slide because I've been exposed to be the charlatan that I am. So that's really what I think we need is raising some of these issues in the public, which we're doing, and then pushing it further forward to hold that accountability going forward.
I'm afraid Zahrah's had to run away, but I'm going to give the final thought, please. Hamish, take it.
Well, indeed, Silas and I need to leap away as well. However, it really is, this is one of those challenges I feel, and it's fortunate we've got people like Zahrah doing battle, or trying to do battle. I think we have this communication issue in so many aspects of where we are in society, and getting the right people together and listening, because what we've actually seen in the Law Society's efforts just recently, we're trying to sort out the mess that was created by the Building Safety Act. We're trying to sort that out, and that's totally unresolved. We're trying to resolve the situation of what upfront information is sort of required, and into this particular sort of melting pot, we have got sort of something else which is more far-reaching. Yet it's whether they consult with the right people and listen to the right people, because so far they're saying to people, "Oh, we want to hear your voice," and then sort of putting in the earplugs to listen to some rock music somewhere or other, because that voice of what needs to be done is not getting to the right places.
Well, other music is available, of course. It just remains for me to thank, of course, Juliet Baboolal of Gunner Cook, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home, Silas JDs of Wiggy Wham, and of course, the main man, Hamish McLay of Search Convey. I would say to all of you, don't worry. More interesting stuff will be coming down the line for us to discuss next week. We never seem to have a lack of that. But until then, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, but please look after your mental health. Goodbye. Bye-bye, one and all.